Hello and welcome to another week of my U.S. State ZenQuiltz journey. Yeah, if you're just joining, welcome and know that you're not behind, right? You can always go back to any state that interests you and do it at any time. If you've been on this journey with me from the beginning and you look forward to those Sunday next states, well, I know that you've been in anticipation of the next state now for 4 weeks. So I don't know what I was thinking when I started this goal in the beginning of 2025, but there is no way that I could have obtained the success of this goal. It was unobtainable. And so, with that being said, 4 weeks of retreat season have passed, and I am back and ready to offer you some more states. So, it was with anticipation, I feel, and a little bit of a nudge that a beautiful, loyal follower from the beginning offered me the tingles and state for this week with a bit of information that I could use. And all I needed to do was put the tile together for you. So thank you so much, Helen, for doing my investigative research to this week's tile or this week's quilt. And I appreciate you. So, yeah, we're headed to New Jersey, 44 beaches on its 130 miles of shoreline and Atlantic City. So, here are the tools that we'll be working with this week. I'm just going to go ahead and push these all off to the side. Notice my super duper large ruler because I have no idea what happened to my ruler. Anyway, neither here nor there. We're going to start where we always start, and that is adding that 3/16 border around the edge of our tile. So I'm just going to go around adding those 3/16 of an inch hash marks that we're then going to connect to add this border around our tile. It allows us to have some kind of uniformity through this journey since we're doing so many different strings, so many different tangles, so many different colors that we're just using this as kind of a visual uniformity as they all come together in one big quilt. All right. So now that we have our penciled border of 3/16 inch, we're going to go ahead and add a hash mark at 1/2 inch on both corners on each side. So a 1/2 inch on the border line at each corner. So two on each line, one for each corner. At a 1/2 inch, just laying that hash mark. Turning our tile and doing that for each edge. And now that we have those hash marks, we're going to use them to connect side to side. So this diagonal line, side to side, to put a channel down the center, embracing each corner. So we're going to do that with both sides or all four sides. And when we get to the opposite channel, we're going to go right through that center. No need to use your go behind. We're going to add that box right to the center of that channel. Okay, so we have this beautiful X that crisscrosses in the center. So we have a square that happens there. Okay, so now that we have our X created in that center, we're going to use the triangular space between there, and we're going to add a 3/4 inch hash on both the left and the right. 3/4 inch from both the left side of this X where it meets our border, 3/4 inch, and then from the right side, 3/4 inch. And we're going to do that again on each side. Okay. All right, so now we're going to connect those hash marks to that center X, and this time we're using our go behind. So we're stopping when we get to that center X line. So we're just creating these channels side to side, but stopping when we get to any existing line. So we have this kind of go behind channel that's happening. Okay, so we're going to turn those go behind channels actually into boxes. So we're just going to go side to side and create these triangular spaces across the top. Now I've finagling mine a little bit so that I get a straight line. I may have, gone up a little high on one side. So I'm just making sure that that box or triangle that's formed has a straight across top. Okay, so just adding that top straight across to connect those channel marks that go side to side. So just dividing those with a box and a triangle on top. Okay, so this is what we should have ish, right? Offering yourself grace with any wonky boxes or lines that you may have, right? It's all good because we'd be cutting these with a rotary tool or a scissors, and we could go off kilter. It's okay. Offer that moment to just say, yeah, it's all good. Go ahead and activate that kneaded eraser. We are all strung up and we are ready to go into the details of this tile. Sometimes the strings of these quilts can get a little crazy, but this week's quilt is inspired by the Cobble Hill 50 state block um, quilt puzzle. All right, so we've toned down our string, but we can still see where we're going because obviously we created it for a reason, right? So now that we're all strung up, but we've toned that string down, I'm going to go right to my light gray and I'm going to start adding my tangles and creating my fabric. So in each of the 5 squares, I'm going to add beach buck. So beach buck, think, because our mind always wants to have reference to something, think sand dollar. So we're going to create these loops, and ultimately we want 5 connector loops in one box. So let me just blow this up since I've taken my string out a little bit so you can see. I'm going to start with the loop, and I'm going to come across, and although I'm arching, I'm not arching like a flower. I'm keeping those arches pretty smooth. And I want to do 5 connectors. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, just making sure that as I was talking, I was counting correctly. So once we have these loops all the way around and these arches all the way around, we're going to add these kind of petals right to the center that point in the direction of those loops. So just these kind of little flux-shaped petals that spread out towards those border loops. So we have this cool little almost flower shape on the inside. And then we're going to go ahead and just divide those petals in half. And then around the outside where the spaces are, we're going to go ahead and just offer a little line. And I like to add just a little seed or bulb on the top of that line, just for a bit more definition to that line. So just a line and maybe a little bulb or seed on the top of that. And then we're going to go ahead and around the outside, whatever we can see, being mindful of where our material was cut, right? I'm just going to add an aura that goes around that outside. So that's our beach buck. We're going to do that to each one of those squares. So in the original Step Out of Beach Buck, it shows that there's also some tipple on the outside, and I'm assuming that's kind of indicating the sand around the beach buck that we've just found laying prominently on our morning walk on the beach on the shores of New Jersey. So just to complete it, that looks maybe a bit more final in our little fabric block. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to each one of those boxes. So being mindful that we want those kind of flat arched sections all the way around, and 5 sections to complete the vision. However that falls for you is just perfect. Adding those flux shaped from the center, pointing to each loop. Dividing that flux shape. And then in the space between those lines with those potential kind of little bulbs at the top, just to add a little dimension or detail, an aura around the outside, and then some tipple to fill in that background. Drop your shoulders, take a breath, and fall into the magic. So, a few bits of information on New Jersey. It is nicknamed the Garden State. And as I already mentioned, um, 44 beaches, 130 miles of shoreline. It has a interesting state flag in that it's very bright. It has yellows, orange, purples, blues, reds. And so that's the direction we're headed with our color palette this week. Um, and with that said, so we're pulling away from the state dances and flowers and all of that fun stuff. And we're going more to the tourist attractions for this one. So here is our beach buck for New Jersey. Yeah. So what's going to happen in the background of this X? Well, let me tell you, I was offered a challenge. My brain doesn't work in straight lines. It actually gives me a bit of anxiety, and I don't even have anxiety. So when I was handed card trick, um, I didn't easily or readily get it. So after many, many, many attempts, we're going to offer, hopefully, I'll get it right with ink in my hand on the very first try, some card trick. So I might suggest, and your brain operates differently than mine, but I might suggest before you go to your tile for this one, just grab a piece of scrap paper and find out which direction these lines really kind of flow. So card trick is for our Atlantic City casinos throughout New Jersey. Great tourist attraction to hit those casinos in Atlantic City and dispersed throughout. Yeah. All right. So card trick starts with an X. And from that X, we're going to pull down a line that goes, I don't even know how to explain it, that goes in the opposite direction of where you started. So if you're going up, you're going over. So you're kind of creating this whirligig. All right. So now that we have this whirligig, the key components to where we're headed are these cross lines. So we always want to look at a cross line, and I find it easier to do this than the next step. So the next step that she has laid out is to pull this line upward and stop here in line with this. But if I know that's where I want to go, I just find it easier to pull this line out and go down. So we're creating this box that goes behind the previous, what will inevitably be a box. I don't know. So here, let's look. I'm going to go here. This line needs to be pulled out on the other side to create the next box. All right. So here we go. This box right here needs to be pulled out the other side, and somewhere down here is the completion of that box, right? And one more right here. This line needs to come to the other side to create that box. So visually, if you can put this together, what we're doing is creating an X, pulling down in opposite directions from where that X started. So we're drawing the opposite direction of where that line started. We have this whirligig. I'll show you the actual step outs, and then if that speaks to you, that's great. So each one of these extensions on our whirligig now get a kick over in the opposite direction again. And our connection comes with this go behind. So this line goes behind this card and connects over here. This line goes behind this card and connects over here. So you're always following the horizontal line across the way to connect this go behind layer of cards. Whew, definitely is a card trick for me. Um, yeah. Okay, so now that we have this first layer laid, we want to look at this as our extension line for this. So here is our X, right? So we're going to be coming backwards. So we want this to be our backwards line to the X line that goes from the bottom left to the top right. So I'm going to go ahead, and here's my backwards. So I want to go, that's my line for my bottom left to top right. And I've already laid that whirligig line. Okay, so now I'm going to cross over to create that X. So now this X line already has its whirligig. I'm going to go ahead and add the whirligigs So now that we have our whirligig, we're being mindful of pulling this line through and adding that box. This line through, adding that box. We don't really see any of the other boxes coming together here because it's all falling off of the page. But I'm just going to finish this off by adding lines upward to visually make it look like what if, right? Just finishing that off. I've added just that upward stroke. That would be my bottom left, top right X line. I'm looking down here. So there's a line that comes out of the center of our box. So there's that. And here's just our little V that's going to interrupt that box for that overlapping card. Whew, that was tough. All right, so here we go. We have 3 more times to pull this card trick off. So, starting with our X, adding those whirligig lines, following those horizontal lines through for the go behind, and drawing what you can see. All right. So we know now that this line is the whirligig portion of our X. Adding the whirligigs or the extensions to our other lines. Here's our horizontal that we're going to pull through and connect. Horizontal. Okay. Much better. Our X. Whirligig. Coming through the connections. Wow, that's tough. My brain, yep, nope, doesn't operate like that. So now that we have all of our cards laid and we can focus on the layout of these cards, we're going to go in and aura each one of those go behind cards. So each layer is going to get an aura around the outside of that card. not the go behind jet out portion, but the go behind of that card. So while we add these auras to our card trick, ugh, my head is swimming with this tingle. Yeah. So thank you, Helen, for challenging me and then having me be challenged to explain. So I apologize if my descriptive of this tangle and how to achieve it didn't really come out real well. You have access, of course, to the step outs to kind of look and be able to grab your own interpretation of how these all kind of fall together. But yeah, another little key component or fact to New Jersey is the tomato pie and the Taylor ham egg and cheese sandwich, which is worth a trip to New Jersey in and of itself, in my opinion. Definitely a must have if you're ever in the area. Yeah, so I notice in pausing over the struggle of this card trick that I didn't complete the string lines for um, for the background pieces in these triangles. So I'm going to go ahead and with my pencil and my ruler, I'm going to complete the string. So from the corner of each box of our now beach buck, I'm going to lay my ruler across that diagonal corner to corner of my beach buck. And I'm going to divide the big triangles into little triangles. I'm going to do that on all four open sides using my go behind. I'm not going through our casino. So now we have this kind of square that goes behind all of that. And again, I'm just going to take my kneaded eraser and tone those down again. You can tell I've not been in the ZenQuiltz journey mindset for the past few weeks, that's for sure. So thank you for the grace, and we'll come out on the other side with a beautiful tile and quilt block, no doubt. But ooh, definitely a challenge today. So hang in there with me. We got this. All right. So we have our beach buck, we have our casino, ugh, and we're headed into these small little triangular spaces. And we're headed to Wildwood with this tangle. So, of course, we know Wildwood is one of the most famous or one of the popular beaches in New Jersey. So, Wildwood just so happens to be a tile or a tangle name. So perfect. But Wildwood is actually a result of a dot grid. We're going to take it out of the dot grid and we're going to focus only on these triangular shapes, which is inevitably what would happen with this dot grid. So the dot grid would be connected with these elongated S shapes to get these kind of almost cadent-like connectors put together here. So we're going to take the dot grid out of the mix, use these corner points as our dots, and we're going to add that same elongated S stroke into each triangular shape. S curve, S curve, S curve. And it doesn't matter where you start or where you end. Just those elongated S strokes coming into play, one triangle at a time. I can definitely feel my shoulders up and my tension high from that casino. So if you're anything like me right now, go ahead and drop those shoulders. Offer yourself that breath and enjoy the flow and the repetition of these wildwoods coming together. Each state completely unique in its expression, offering different tangles that relate to that state in some way, shape, or form. And each one with a story to tell. Yeah. Oh, we made it through our tangling of New Jersey. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the color. And I mentioned previously about the state flag being yellows and oranges, purple, blue, and red, a little bit of everything. So I've chosen this week the 991, 493, and 676 as my color palette. Of course, as always, feel free to grab any colors that speak to you for the expression that you're doing. But I've pulled the colors from the state flag this week. Sometimes the states have a state color or, whatever. But yeah, this one, no state color, but definitely a very colorful state flag. So I'm going back to offering my palette to my acetate this week and using my blender to put these colors into my tile. Just making sure that my blender is clean now that I went in and soaked it all up. And then I'm going to go with my blender directly onto my tile. I really seem to be drawn to the texture and variation that this technique offers. By all means, if you want to go directly to your tile and create that fabric color direct with your marker, perfect. If you want to outline each um, section or patch of that block with a color and then blend it inward, that we've also been doing, feel free to do that. Whatever medium you are using, doesn't matter. Whatever you want this quilt to be for you, you now have several different color options uh, that you can use to add your color to this fabric. Okay, so I'm adding that 991 into each of those beach bucks. And again, I can always go in and add just a little more depth and color to add that variation. So I don't want that real clean, crisp color onto these boxes. I want that palette to kind of have some depth through the color variation of how it's being laid, offering that automatic shadow, that automatic variation into that color palette or into that patch. So some darker spots, some very transparent, lighter spots. Can always go back in and add some more of those darker, shadowy spots if I feel like it's too flat. Yeah. So there's my beach buck. I'm going to go into that set 676. And again, I'm going to go to that acetate, offering my palette there, cleaning off my blender so I don't get contamination, right? And maybe not wanting to go too dark. So maybe offering a little bit on a scratch piece of paper before I go directly to my quilt and offering that violety color in honor of our state flower, the purple violet. I didn't know that there was any other color violet, so that in and of itself was educational. And I guess I'm assuming that because they're specifically saying purple violet, there is in fact another color. So again, going in and adding some texture and depth just by adding some deeper, darker variations of this color into my mix. So using that palette, coming on kind of strong. I am wiping some off, coming on kind of strong and rubbing it around. If you're finding your tile pilling with this technique, you are pushing way too hard on your blender. Allow your blender to work for you, not against you. Circular motions allow that ink to dissipate across your tile more freely and cleanly, not allowing those real tangible lines to come into play. Just toning those down. And again, I have a piece of scratch paper off to the side that once I fill up my brush, I'm then going back and wiping some of that color off. Again, I can always add more, much more difficult to take away once it's on or smooth out. So that circular motion blends those together. Straight back and forth motion doesn't allow you to blend as freely as that circular motion. If you are saying to yourself, I'm not pressing hard at all, and it's still pilling, that's a dry blender. Grab another blender and start fresh. Although these blenders do go a really long way. So if you find yourself replacing them like every 2 or 3 quilts, um, that's not the answer. It's not dry. It's pressure. All right. So again, going through any light spaces, any depth that any transparencies that you want to kind of add depth to, now's your opportunity to do that. I really like that pale into the dark and maybe add a little bit more dark around that center for that center beach buck. All right, and now cleaning off my blender, I'm going to go to my blue. So 493 is the blue that I've chosen um, for my palette. Again, whatever speaks to you. And this blue, again, could get away from you rather quickly. So again, scratch piece of paper off to the side. I'm going to take some of it off before I head to my tile. These triangular spaces, I'm going to acknowledge each small triangular space as an individual. So what's going to happen is by taking off some of that excess, I'm going to be able to control that the outside edge of that triangle by default is going to be a little bit darker than my center. And it may take a few to get to that point where you're noticing that happening, right? But I want each one of those triangular shapes to be an individual patch. Because remember, this is our fabric. If we were tangling this Zia, we would be doing it much differently. We'd be adding detail to each of these tangles. We'd be giving some love, some shading, some depth. But instead, we're letting each of those tangles merely just be defined as a piece or a detail to our fabric in our quilt, right? So different approach completely. It's not about the detail of our tile, but rather the story of our tile and the fabrics that go into this block. Maybe wiping off more than I really'd like to, but again, I could always go back and add more. Can't very well take away. And that's where I'm going to go right now, just adding that background color. And I've decided to kind of come in after the background's been filled with a bit more detail. All right, so once you're happy with the depth you've created with that color, whatever that means to you, we have our fabrics all pieced together. They're laying in front of us on our table. And now we want to make it official. So we're going to go ahead and stitch all of these individual pieces together. So each triangle of our wildwood, each square, each strip of our casino, each one is going to get individually stitched together. I have my dark gray micron in my hand, and slowly, deliberately, and intentionally, up and down with that needle and thread, being mindful to keep those stitches nice and crisp and clean, staccato. The more slow and intentional you are, the less flicky little tails you get in your ink, right? There's no flicky little tails in thread, right? So just take your time, drop your shoulders, take a breath, and enjoy the process. One stitch at a time. Pour yourself a breath. Check in on those shoulders. Question your why. Why do we do this? Take a pause, change that perspective, and see the different voice that this Zia tile offers as we turn it into our quilt block, right? It's the stitching that make that quilt a visual. It's not the tangles, it's not the fabric or the colors. It's the stitching that brings it together and makes it our quilt block. So don't sell this step short, because otherwise it's just a kind of nondescript Zia with no details and um, kind of simple tangling, right? So this is the magic right here. This is what makes it part of our journey in this little adventure. If you've been on this journey for a while and you haven't laid out your tiles or your blocks yet together, go ahead and take that opportunity when this tile is done and just lay them all out and see how beautiful. Visualize this quilt all done with our 50 blocks. It's going to be pretty spectacular. When you think you're all stitched up, go ahead and change that perspective and see if anything jumps out at you. Otherwise, wow, look at that quilt, man. I feel like We definitely struggled together today, but New Jersey is a beautiful quilt. So here we go. We're going to add some of that dimension, some of that depth, because once again, I used that blending technique from the acetate to the tile to get all of those kind of highs and lows and transparency and more opaqueness to our color. I'm going to go ahead and be mindful of those stitches and the shadows that those stitches kind of create within adding those pieces together. So inside, right on that stitch line, I'm going to take my 1034, that goldenrod, right in to that beach buck. And in a circular motion, I'm going to stay kind of tight against that edge and add a shadow so that I can kind of start that pucker, that detail of where those threads come in and out, adding the shadow, connecting those individual patches together that form almost a poof to the center of each one of those patches. So again, circular motion. I'm just going around the outer edge of each of those beach buck squares, or blocks, I guess I should say. Circular motion, allowing that to kind of blend and dissipate out. Staying tight against the edge so visually we can see this is all shadowed and tight with those stitches coming in and out, creating that poof or that puff to that patch. Meanwhile, the pucker, of each of those stitches or that thread coming in and out creates that automatic depth and shadow all the way around each one of those blocks or those patches. So inside of our casino, I'm going to use that process red, that 994. Again, just going right over that seam or that stitch. Keeping my edges tight, but ever so slightly pulling in on those corners just a little bit more to extend that shadow into that space. Ah, here's our why. When you think you don't see what you're doing because the colors are so similar, change your perspective. Look at the difference between the depth and the poof of this channel versus the flatness of this channel or patch. So when you think you're not really doing anything, change that perspective halfway through or after one detail and watch how that blossoms and blooms and changes the voice of what you've done. It's never too early to ooh and ah, right? So as you're pulling that quilt block out to change its perspective, yeah, offer yourself a smile and ooh and ah at the beauty that you've created. It's all part of the process. Gotta enjoy it, have fun with it. And even our casino doesn't look bad on our fabric once we're all done. Just kind of adds a beautiful texture in the background. Um, so no need for stress if that was a challenge for you like it was for me. We made it to the other side and all is perfectly well. Okay. So for that blue, I'm going to go to my 105 and add a little shade of cobalt turquoise, which is a bit darker than the blue that we've laid. And I'm okay with that because the blue is almost maybe a little too transparent for me now that I've kind of laid it down. So the depth that this offers right around our edging is just a beautiful addition to kind of bring it to life and tie it in, pull it forward. So notice the depth, the flatness, yeah? Changing that perspective, noticing our why. Can almost touch that poof that's happening to the center of each one of these triangles. I will admit through the shading, however, the details of our wildwood are almost getting lost. Maybe to the tune where I might have suggested we do that in the dark gray instead. All right. So we have an outside border that hasn't been touched yet. And so choices, right? What colors do we want inside of that border? And I think for me, I'm going to add my yellow in the large spaces and make my corners my purple color. So I think that that's where I'm going to head. So I'm going to use that 91991 and I'm going to go direct. So I'm adding that color direct to the outside of my tile, and I'm going to do my lighter color first so I don't have any bleed from that purple color when I lay it down. I didn't cut this fabric very well today. I got definitely a little sloppy with those lines, and I've dripped cut fabric down my, into my next patch, which certainly would never happen with a pair of scissors, right? So not being very deliberate and intentional, I guess. So I'm going to pick that tile up, and because this is fabric, I'm going to ink those sides, those deckled edges, because if you've not laid um, your squares out yet and you've not done this little step, do so, because I assure you that the loudest voice in the layout will be the white edges that haven't been colored. So do take the time on this journey to again ink those sides up and get rid of that white deckled edge. And then going direct with that purple right into the corners of our quilt. And then adding our stitching to the border. And into those corner pieces. So here we have our State Quilt block for New Jersey. Go ahead and hold that out at arm's length. Ooh, ah, offer yourself a smile and sign that block. Find your top, add your chop or your signature, and go ahead and make that official. Here is your New Jersey State Quilt block for our 50 states journey. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure, and be on the lookout next Sunday for the next quilt. If you've not heard, today also released Holly Jolly July, which is an event, 12 holiday classes or festive winter/Christmas classes in July from July 14th to the 25th, all recorded. You can find that link on my website, or in any of the social media groups from any one of the teachers that are participating as well. Please join us. Thank you so much. Until next time.